Welcome, everyone, to the first inaugural episode of the Misinformed Masses Podcast. I am Jeff, here with my co-host.
I'm Matt. How's it going?
And yeah, today we are going to do the first episode, and we have this wonderful setup image of you. Is Donald Trump your president? I thought this was an important place to start, because...
Well, besides the fact that, I don't know, we had votes unless the Electoral College decides to go crazy.
And last time we checked, there was not massive voter fraud, even though a third-party candidate who got last place is alleging said fraud.
Just because you can keep all the money that you raise for political campaigns, even after you lose tax-free, I'd raise money too.
So what you're telling me is you approve.
Oh, 100%.
All right, I give it to you. She's she's an astute businesswoman and looking forward to the future of her party. Sorry.
I mean, is there any other? I mean, you got less than 1% of the votes, not just nationally, but in those states, and then you raise $6.5 million or whatever she did. It's like, okay. And then you happen to not go through with the recounts in a few of the states.
Yeah.
I have a few million extra dollars in the bank, tax free. Ah, awesome.
It's amazing. This election couldn't have been more eye-opening. So, to get to the start, this is our first podcast, so the critical, seminal issue of the podcast is, how would we ever be inspired to make the name The Misinformed Masses? And
that was a shovel.
yeah, well, I think both of us have we talked about right before we started recording, that I think both of us feel that, I don't know about Matt, but I definitely felt this year I was even part of the Misinformed Masses. Probably earlier in the year, I'd say like spring, I was spouting some real stupid stuff that I absorbed from my environment. Heavily coastal, liberal, I'm a teacher, everybody I know is pretty far left of center. And that's just how they talk. And they're just, they're spouting all the things they hear on the mainstream TV, and that's their worldview, and they weren't critical. So, and I absorbed a bit of that too. Thankfully, I got over it, but...
It's like a flu. You catch it, and then, you build an immunity to it. But you can still infect people every now and then.
Yeah, so I guess the election inspired us both to, pull the trigger on this. As we go through the weeks, you guys will figure out more about... Yep, you'll find out more about us. Before we move on, though, we want to thank our hero. Here we go. We got a nice video image. I'm not going to play the video, but I'm going to show you the picture. The Hale did a wonderful article on our friend Denzel, quoting, of course, a now banned, but we'll talk about this in a future episode, a now, in some states and schools, public schools, banned quote of, who'd he quote, Matt? He quoted...
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. And here we go, yeah. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed, and if you do read it, you're misinformed. So thank you, Denzel Washington, and by proxy, Mark Twain. And thank you, Matt, for bringing this to my attention.
Well, I thought it was kind of hilarious because he was, as he talked about, and I think that's why they got onto the topic. It came out a week before the election that, that he was going to be a Trump supporter instead of a Hillary supporter, and it was part of the fake news. And he's like, that is not true at all. But it was just eye-opening.
Yeah. So, but still, to be fair to the left, there was a decent amount, and there still is, of, I would call it, right-wing spin. Of course exists, and like the counter-narrative to the left's narrative can be as outrageous as the left is being, but I don't know if I'd say it was more outrageous.
Before the primaries, I'd say the right was a little more outrageous in the press. It was out there.
Yeah, especially attacking each other, right?
As it heated up, though, it got to where the left was just... It was just going crazy. And both sell newspapers. I get it. Get clickbait. I get it. It makes money. And here's a shout out to our Macedonian brothers making a shit ton of money.
Macedonia,
off fake news.
A real country, not Greece.
If I was a teenager in Russian bloc province. I do the same.
Well,
exact
come on,
thing.
Soviet bloc. You know, they may or may not be Slavic, but
Yeah.
not being PC. But yeah, okay, Russian bloc. We'll call them in the Yalta Conference Zone.
All right, Yalta Conference.
Okay, so that brings us to our first. We will attempt. This is a hopeful attempt. We may not actually stick to it. The goal of this show is still analysis of news and happenings. And the reason I separate those is because, let's be honest here, not everything will be covered in news. There is a certain priority that will be done, but at the same time, we live in the United States. Most news ignores the world, and there is no guarantee we won't.
And just because it's happening doesn't mean it's news.
Yeah, but at the same time, we don't want to ignore the rest of the world all the time either. So
No, we can't do that. There's too much fun going on.
yeah. So okay, let's see. For any news that caught your eye this week, one caught my eye too. I'm just trying to open the.
I saw something today that made me laugh.
What was it?
On Bloomberg, it was. Let me see.
If it's the same thing I just linked to you, we're telepathically linked, by the way. No.
No,
but,
it's more of after the election.
Oh, amazing!
California tried to do a calyx, so they want to do like a Brexit exit of
Oh
of
man,
United
yeah,
States.
that should have been our opening picture. Vladimir Putin and Trump riding a bear. Wait, is that Trump or
Right.
is that our governor?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I
I'm
know
looking.
I know Trump's fallen off, but I'm not sure if the bear rider is George Brown or Governor Brown or Putin. But Putin's better
Oh, it's
looking.
Yekaterinburg. He's in Russia. Yeah, I have a student who's from there. She's yeah, wow. Shout out to Anna if she's still in the U.S. But damn, yeah,
Yeah, no,
Yekaterinburg.
they have.
So why
Yeah,
would
no,
this
so the-
secessionist? Did you read the article? Why would this person
Yeah,
be
I read it.
in Russia?
It's pretty well. Everyone is trying to break away. If you think you have a populace that is being oppressed or should be independent, you're trying to break away. I mean, and don't get me wrong, freedom should be for everyone if they want it. But I just thought it was hilarious
Oh,
that you're
no.
hearing all this Russian influence and propaganda and spying, but the people that the Calyx like supporters are turning to
It's
are
Russia.
in Russia
It's perfect.
and being funded by the Russian
Oh.
government to an extent.
So the left spends the whole. Well, this is going to tie into our theme later. The listeners don't know this, or viewers, but this will be in our talk later. But this is amazing. I'm just leaving the image up, watching Trump fall off a bear, a retarded bear. I'm so happy. I can't even follow up with that. It's amazing.
That's what, from the image alone, I thought it was worth it.
Yeah, so mine was less fun. Like, I didn't actually decide to pick this, but it's more of like if I'm going to recommend something for people, just because it's funny. It's the same thing. We both had Bloomberg today. I did not find this. A guy at my work found it. His name's Henry. Henry found this. The Pessimist Guide to 2017. Now, the only reason I actually wanted to read it at all, apparently last year, their Pessimist Guide included Brexit and a Trump win. So, they were being sarcastic, of course.
Well, of course, they were doing. It was one of those probably like the Onion things where it's like the worst things that could happen in 2016.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's bad. Yeah, the fact that this is actually. I mean, it comes true, and I'm not going to show the whole thing because I don't care that much. But for those looking, take a look at it. There's a sidebar, and it has Trumplandia, Yalta 2.0. And if you don't know what Yalta is, that was back when the Soviets and the West basically separated the world immediately after World War II. So it was Churchill, Truman, and Stalin, and they just separated the world into spheres of influence. And there is that pressure from Russia. Oh, man, we're talking about Russia a lot today. But Russia would love it if we just let them have their old stomping grounds and left them alone.
Well, of course they would. But you know what? Here's the thing, though. You keep going into. I mean, we're going to get into this later, but I even read an article yesterday from a guy who went from finance to work in the Ukrainian government, trying to fight the rebels and get rid of corruption. and he quit within 7 months because he saw how much corruption there actually was. So it's like, okay, well, no wonder populists are mad at him. And Russia comes in and goes, hey, we know we're corrupt, but at least we take care of you.
I mean, it's the point, I guess. And whatever you can say against Putin, he is extremely popular in his own country. And I don't think the near Soviet, former Soviet bloc countries want to be annexed. None of them do. And even a lot of the domestic Russian minorities, I don't think are that interested, to be genuinely honest. I do not think they're interested.
Yeah, well, I don't. It's a big country. I mean, what was it like? Well, it always shocks me how far east the country spans.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone knows it goes to Europe, but how far? It just keeps going. So it's going to touch a lot of things, and it's going to piss off a lot of people, and a lot of people are going to get excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. And but again, take a look at the list if you haven't seen it. Anybody? It's interesting. I want to bookmark this. Actually, I'll bookmark it after, but like to see how much of it comes true, because I don't think being a realist and a pessimist are substantially different things, and you shouldn't necessarily conflate the two. But will bad stuff happen this year? I mean, it's a year, and we have humans, so the answer is yes. Okay, any other news that caught your fancy this year, Matt? Or this week?
Well, I mean, the Trans-Pacific Partnership gets talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go into the pluses and minuses of it, but I just had 2 comments on it.
Yeah.
One, they're saying they're all going to blame Trump now that he canceled it.
Mm-hmm.
And fair enough, he said he would. But Obama officially canceled it the day after the election, so technically Obama canceled it. He didn't even allow it to go through all the way.
Or even to be voted on, right? I don't think it's had a vote.
But no, they were all waiting for the United States. I just thought it was hilarious because, I mean, you can blame him, but it's like he's not in office yet.
Yeah. And that's been a theme if we're going to talk about people being misinformed. All the things Trump is blamed for, regardless if you supported him, and I'm sure people who we know and who might listen to this definitely did not support him, but even if you didn't, you cannot blame him for things he had no power in.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, and you can say, well, he has influence. Well, sure. But he has no power in government, so he cannot enact a policy. He can influence, but...
Well, before the election, even before the primaries were done, I have to find it. We can put it in the show notes or something. But the Republicans in the House or in Washington pretty much said, we won't oppose anything Obama wants to go through because we don't want to look bad for the election.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have pushed anything he wanted to be pushed through. He could have pushed TPP. He could have pushed his Supreme Court pick, which, by the way, I think he should have at least thrown it out. He's the president still.
Yeah,
there's a vacancy. Mm-hmm. He should fill it.
Yeah, but I would say that's a leftist. How can you say it? A leftist. I've seen some leftists critique him on the fact that him and many Democrats, to quote, I'm quoting a guy who does a show called Secular Talk. He's really extreme, and I mean he's leftist. He's pretty progressive. He's anti-religion, but at the same time he's very logical. He blames Obama for not having any political gumption. That he doesn't want to push anything. And he barely tries. He'll have a speech and he'll say this should happen, and then he gets shocked when it doesn't happen and he didn't follow up.
Well, there's a reason for that. At least a lot of people think he built up a lot of capital, political capital, and a lot of favors, and he used every single bit of it to get Obamacare through. And so he had nothing else to give.
So if you go back
to papers and reports coming out when that passed, that he used every chit he had, every bargain, every favor, every anything to get that through.
Mm-hmm.
So he used everything. So now it's just kind of like a lame duck since then.
Okay, yeah, that's the point. I see. Hey, he just can't get anything done because he burned his political capital to try to do reform, and it failed.
Pretty much.
Oh, it's amazing. But yeah, the TPP...
technically
Yep.
it didn't fail. If we're talking about Obamacare, he said all along that it will be
It will collapse on
it,
purpose.
it will collapse, and that is the point.
Mm-hmm.
They're stuck with it. They'll never be able to get rid of it, but they're stuck with it. And so, um, he knew it was going to be there, and I'll have to hand it to him. He is quite the astute politician. You hear him talk. I don't care if you like him or love him or despise him or just are neutral. He said what he was going to do, and he did it for the most part. And he made you feel good about it as he was doing it.
Yeah, it's a point. He sold it, so. Yeah, no, but like going back real quick to promises and things he could have passed, like from the outside perspective, like we both, if anybody's curious where we get major influences, we do love to read non-English newspapers. We both read some British newspapers. I have a heavy Japan influence. On the other side of the ocean, Asians, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they were all really excited about TPP because of its ability not just for trade, but most countries in the TPP were promising reforms. Now, would they have enacted them all? I mean, of course not. Come on. No, I don't think anybody expected that. But the possibility of reform is the biggest motivator behind that. Like, if we think about it this way, if Japan would have had internal reforms, that's the third biggest economy in the world. That's a big deal. Like, who cares about the other countries? If Japan would have reformed one of our biggest allies, that's a big deal.
Japan is not going to get their reform in order until they're beat by, say, Korea or something like that, as far as like GDP and just size of their nation, their wealth.
Yeah, it's a point.
Because they're so much bigger than a lot of their other Asian neighbors besides China and Indonesia, of course. But once a smaller country who's considered inferior is bigger and better than them, then they might get their butt kicked into gear.
The part of me that knows so many people wants to defend that statement, like say, no, don't be ignorant. But I really feel that no, that actually it needs something like that to hurt their pride enough that they would actually. I'm looking right now at my Economist Pocket World and figures, and let's see, the Japanese GDP is 4.9. Wait, no, almost 5 trillion. Now I want to see where's Korea. Did they do South Korea, Republic of Korea? I'm sure it's going to be South Korea. Here we go. So yeah, South Korea's not that close. They're 1.3 trillion. So
well, I understand, but throwing a mix of deflation mixed with higher growth. I mean, we're going to talk about it in a week or in a few weeks about how important actual numbers are.
Yep.
But you can get serious catch-up growth if your economic figures are just like 1 or 2% total.
Yeah.
And not like extra on top of China's 9%.
They just need 1% to actually have a decent country because they're so big already.
Yeah, like Japan's only decreasing in reality.
Yeah.
And that's okay for some parts of the economy. But if all Korea has to do is grow a little bit and not take North Korea in under its wing, but that's a different story.
Yeah. That's a whole other episode, man. Like the integration of Korea. Would that be a good idea? I mean, yeah, that's a different. We'll have that discussion some other time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, before we get to the main topic,
yeah,
thinking of issues that were pretty hilarious. I was thinking, and I've heard it talked about, like Joe Rogan talked about it, and I heard a few other political people talk about it. Why we actually have to be not scared, but we have to admit that the president has more power through executive orders than we care to admit currently. Because when Obama signed the executive order where he could detain anyone indefinely for no reason.
Yep, and he gave that power to the military.
Everyone's like, that's a good thing. Like he
oh
can
my
do
God.
that because we're never going to get somebody we don't like. And now the fact that Trump got elected, everyone's freaking out. To be honest, I would have been scared of Hillary also.
Yep. But again, I think we should almost save this one for a future. I found an article. Let's see. Was that the article? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I heard about that executive order. I'm looking up on my other screen, and there's my bookmarks. Goodbye. People are going to know what I'm into now. Oh, no, I'm a video game nerd. But okay, let's see. News. But I'll have to find it for later. But I found an article specifically referencing that you shouldn't be surprised about the best way I can heard it phrased is like the sudden sneak up. It's in my other browser. I'll find it later. The sudden, how would you call it? There's like a people are acting shocked at the sliding of our democracy. And again, we should need to do this. I'll show you the link later. But there's a sliding in our democracy that was heavily continued under Obama. Now, don't get me wrong. Did Bush help start it? Yeah, the first Bush used executive power strongly. But Obama is a huge part of adding to that. It's not just like Trump's going to get in office with the powers that are traditionally presidents. Right? Like, there has been help to push it further, which is just mind-blowing. And here we go. So it's an executive order, and I'll move this over and show our audience. Boop.
No, but it's, I mean, even what you were talking about, it's a creep, but that's the one thing that I think a lot of people got wrong this election was the difference between Democrats and Republicans as far as policies they pushed through was almost non-existent. So they were becoming like one giant party.
Which one?
No, I was just saying in general, like, because you were just talking about how people, like how Obama signed a lot more executive actions than George W. Bush did. But under the same time frame, though, it's like Republicans and Democrats became so similar on things they had passed that it's like, okay.
Oh, yeah, you found that National Review article. Thank you. Yep, I'm linking it just so they can see it. But we can talk about it extremely at a later date if you think it's worth a topic. But yeah, here we go. The Democrats finally wake up to the dangers of illiberalism.
Now, it's not mainstream media, so be careful. It might be considered fake news.
Yeah, and full disclosure, everybody, trigger warning, National Review is actually a center-right journal. It's crazy. Calm down. It's not going to hurt you. You should read, don't make your echo chamber. You're lagging a little bit. Say it again.
Oh, I didn't really say anything important.
Okay, I heard the
Continue
robot.
on.
Yeah, okay, so I showed the National Review article. I'm not that worried about discussing it today because we're already about 20 minutes in, and I want to at least do our nod to the main topic of this week, which we alluded to already, but which is stop plug in, okay. Basically, our main course this week, we're going to look at this New Yorker article, the propaganda about Russian propaganda. So basically, this week has been kind of crazy. Oh, the voice quality's sucking. Oh, it's back. Good. So, the blame on, and this goes when we talked about recounts and everything, right? The blame on Russia as a agent of change in the American elections and how this has been blown out of proportion. And is it true? Like, is Russia really doing these things? What's the short answer, Matt?
No. I mean,
why not? I mean, aren't they the bad guys of James Bond movies?
Well, everyone is a bad guy, but China, Russia, U.S., we have our propaganda machines going in each other's countries. That's part of the game, isn't it? Everyone plays it. But as far as the hacking, I mean, and Russian involvement, sure, some Macedonian teenagers were making a couple grand a month making fake news. Well, you have spent plenty of time in academia. You know this. Check the sources.
Yep.
A seventh grader writing an essay on anything, on Barbie's creation, they have to put in sources, and the teacher makes them check it.
Again, let's be fair here. This would have to be an academically rigorous teacher, and as somebody who spent a lot of time teaching in academia, you can't assume that anymore. Because
yeah, true, but I heard someone's 7th grade daughter the other day talk about fake news and just go, well, Dad, even in class, we need to cite sources, and it has to be a site that's real. That's actually real.
You're giving me
hope,
You have
to
Matt.
Read the source.
Yeah, but it's a good point. You can't just claim to have a source. One source who is an anonymous source.
Well, and the one source that's an anonymous source that submits your anonymous source. I mean, the New Yorker article you're talking about, they kind of eviscerate Proper Not's whole thing.
Yeah, and a quick thing
And
for people who don't know what Prop or Not is. I don't want to open their website, but if you're curious, our listeners that is, you can find this website, the Propaganda About Russian Propaganda, and the first sentence it does talk about the Prop or Not team. But what is that for people who don't know? I'm sure everybody, if you haven't heard about Russia influencing our elections, that's definitely a thing that's happened. But how about the angle on what exactly is Prop or Not? Or what do they claim to be?
Prop or Not is an anonymous investigative group, and they make claims on quote unquote links between groups and posts and information. They all claim they're to be experts in the field, but they're all anonymous. No problem with being anonymous on the internet if you can, to bring something. But I mean, but when you're trying to be the two people at the end of the article, they talk to some guys who their only job is finding out Russian propaganda, and a few of them are actually, and one of the guys is actually in Russia and uses his real name, which is pretty ballsy. And they pretty much go, "There's no link," and if anything, the only thing we found is Prop or Not people are in Ukraine.
Some are, or is it a majority? Is it a majority or just a handful?
They just think the guy who's an anti-Kremlin guy, so he wants to find Kremlin influence in other, and he just thinks that he's got a pretty good one, but who knows? I mean, but it's like the article, another one that came from a security firm, FireEye. Their whole job is making you. So every time there's a crisis, they selling their own. But in this Bloomberg article, it was literally circular logic saying, well, because Russia hacked and disseminated information, and then they on the killer campaign, and because their sites used and picked it up, then, well, in that case, it must be Russian influence.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this article now. I've heard about FireEye, but yeah, like you said, it's self-serving, right? Because, like, why wouldn't you want to say the Russians are hacking the servers if it's not, even if it's not real, or you can't, a Russian hacked something once, you can claim the Russian government is actually doing it, right?
Well, the campaign was saying it for the emails and the WikiLeaks stuff.
Yeah.
Almost every single governmental agency that investigated it said it was not.
So it was not state-sponsored hacking.
Pretty much.
So, but it could have been Russian-based, but that is not necessitated being. I mean, as we both know, let's just say from our private experience, Russians are quite a technologically literate group.
Anyone on the internet who's not an idiot is can figure out pretty quickly how to store things on a server in a country that doesn't have extradition treaties, and then bounce it off another server.
Yeah, of course. And we
easy.
would never deploy those techniques, but one can learn about them quite easily online.
It's legal, so why wouldn't you if you want to?
Yeah, again, it's not illegal. So there we go, everybody. But yeah, so Russia's being blamed by groups who have an interest in it. Now, that does not mean it's all lies, but for example, I gotta find, do we have a recount article here? I don't think we do. I cannot find a specific recount article. If you can send me one, that'd be good. But like the recount, right? There was some quotes, some of my favorite, involved them, like people like Jill Stein accusing. People were basically accusing different people of holding issues. So, for example, how can you hack a voting machine? How can Russia hack a voting machine that never plugs into the internet? But because it's electronic, these old people who were politicians are like, they are hacking the machines. They might hack my toaster. That's how I hear it.
Well, I just think it's funny because before the election, a lot of quote-unquote alt-right groups were saying how one of the companies that has the biggest contracts for electronic voting machines he or they are susceptible, and they've been known for years. They're susceptible to intrusion from outside sources.
Okay, but it's an accusation, not necessarily.
And no, and so it's an accusation. So so security experts said it is possible, but now it's like because the Democrats lost, it's like, see, there's vulnerabilities. There must have been hacking.
Yeah, but didn't they defend the whole? The problem is, this is where we're going to the misinformed, right? How did anybody, like, it's, I shouldn't say it that way. I should say, how can people miss this fact that during this election, before the election, the Democrats would only talk about how we have to respect elections, and immediately after, we don't respect elections because Russia's now hacking it after they lost? Like, why can't we just maintain this logical consistency? That's what gets me. Like, why can't we have principles? Like, if the system was good before the election, shouldn't it be good after?
Well, you'd think, but I mean, it's all a power grab. I get that, but now it's becoming a thing where, we talked about where Facebook, Google, Twitter, Microsoft are starting to band together and to get out illicit and fake news. And the problem is, the fake news is just anything they deem fake. And
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, and again, that comes down to our general theme of being, like, the problem with, now that we're getting to the main issue of, fake news. Oh god, yeah, we gotta show her face. Okay. As somebody who has the qualifications to be an assistant professor, I find this an affront.
You mean the fact that she's
an ultra-liberal assistant professor of communications at Merrimack College, which is probably a community college. We should figure it out.
I'll look. And no,
Yeah.
but it's the list that they all
Use
that
already.
the large organizations have used to start I don't know, their witch hunt.
Yeah, witch hunting / taking off advertising and that kind of thing. Yeah, Zero Hedge highlights themselves here. Of course, we're using Zero Hedge's site. If you can't see it, my resolution's kind of bad. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of sites on here. Some of them are in fact quite fake, but some are, yeah, not that way. And don't get me wrong, she already took it down, and she did a public statement admitting it shouldn't have been as, like, picked up as it was. Like, she's just one professor. Gee, many Christmas. And she's an assistant professor. I mean, she's probably not going to get tenure. She's probably just doing adjunct. You never know. She could not be an adjunct. But, the fact that this was picked up with no vetting, none at all, and people were totally fine with the people they disagree with being snuck in onto it, that just grinds my gears.
Yeah, no, the grinding. They picked it up and like ran with it. I mean, what was it? The House passed a bill last week where they could, it has to go through the Senate, but they want to censor and even put in counter propaganda and funding to get rid of fake news sources, which could be influenced by outside entities.
Yeah, but
AKA Russia.
Yeah, but
they say it.
But this brings me back around to, like, the fact that foreign governments always have a chance to fund things. Like, and nobody ever flips this around. I listen to Ben Shapiro sometimes, which I'm sure will make some people angry, but he always makes the point, put it on the other foot. Like, do American companies and organizations ever put our values, hey left, I'm looking at you, and right, hey, do we ever put our values into other countries' elections and other countries' culture? Trick question.
Well, I thought Dan Carlin on his podcast, Common Sense, covered it pretty well because he talked about these in, I think it was a few podcasts ago when he was talking about the Russian influence and just in everything in the election. And he was saying, you can't tell me we don't do the same thing. And because he's really big in history and how it involves and connects. And the numbers don't lie. We have national broadcasting sources. We fund a lot to other countries for national broadcasting. I mean, you can't tell me we don't tell NPR what to put on.
Yeah, and without a doubt, we literally have, like, radio whatever, like Radio Europe, We had we still have a radio broadcaster to Cuba, I'm pretty sure. Like, there is public broadcast funded by America. We did it into the Soviet Union. Like, this is part of a platform. And the people right now attacking this fake news thing are leftists. I'm not even going to use the word liberal because they're misusing it, and I refuse. The English teacher in me can't handle it. I refuse to let them steal the word liberal. They're not liberals because they don't believe in freedom. They believe in control, so they can't be liberals. But on that rant aside, the fact that these are the same people who are trying to send their own ideologies to other countries and, safe spaces, political correctness, all of these kind of things, human rights. And human rights is a huge, it's not that I don't think people should be treated humanely, but human rights as an idea is a Western idea developed out of the World War II. All of that suffering and the horrible sight of man that everybody saw in World War II from every side, I think, really led people. That's what led to the creation of human rights. Now, human rights has gone so far now, I'm not sure where it's going to end, because everything and everyone and every choice has human rights, and everything's a human rights issue, so nothing's a human rights issue, but it's still a Western thing. If you go to other countries and say you need to have these too, aren't you also projecting your stuff onto other people?
Well, don't you know it begins and ends at the Human Rights Council at the United Nations?
Oh, the one that Saudi Arabia chairs, right?
Yeah, and everyone on the council who makes decisions is from a country with an abysmal human rights record. But besides that,
it's important.
Besides that, it's very important.
Yeah, it's painful. It hurts me. The fact that fake news can come out. Do I have the other one on here? You sent me.
I have it.
No, I was looking for the other fake news site that we were talking about. But I can't find it. That's okay. So, because there was the actual coverage by the Washington Post, I think, that just ran with a fake news story. It was the proper night one. But the fact that people are uncritically going into these news sources now, don't get me wrong. Oh yeah, the apology.
Well,
that's a fun one.
I mean, before even fake news was a thing, I remember for the last few years reading a lot of sources from journalists saying how the biggest problem with investigative journalists and actually reporting is no one has the budget or pays for journalists anymore. So they all pick up the same beat writer, the same freelancer who went somewhere, and they all run with the same story.
Yeah, and it's very derivative instead of original and investigatory.
And the problem is, how do you verify the accusations and the sources? It's expensive. But there's even technology that you can do it in groups you can send your stuff to, and they'll verify it. But it takes money, it takes time. But you need that page view in before you go home from work. Or you have a quota of how many views you need or clicks you need as a journalist or as a newspaper. You got to get that in. A good story on, I don't know who did what this week, and it's not true, but no one remembers 2 weeks later when you write a retraction.
Yeah, and this comes down to the issue, too, that sites even like BuzzFeed are considered news now. Like BuzzFeed, breaking news that's fake or not.
I mean, I saw an interview with BuzzFeed's founder a few years ago, within 2 years ago, and he said he knows that it's meant, he knows it's fake, and they're meant to elicit this reaction because they get clicks. It's not that Michael Jackson was mauled by a tiger. It is actually the truth, but it got you into their site to click it.
Yeah, and of course the title would not be Michael Jackson mauled by tiger. Tiger put down. Was Michael Jackson mauled by a tiger, or is he just happy to see me? And you click on it, and and in the end, it's either a fake story or it's a bait and switch, essentially.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, can sites bait and switch? Yes, but if you're a bait and switch site, don't automatically accuse other sites of also baiting and switching. Oh, by the way, now, I am showing just so you know, I'm showing the We Demand Washington Post retract its propaganda story defaming naked capitalism, and they're suing. I'm just
Well, I mean, I think it's a good thing to start. I mean, I don't like lawsuits,
it's how
uh,
you stop people from.
but we have defamation and libel issues, and we have those statutes and laws for a reason.
Yeah, and specifically, you are supposed to use them. Like media companies are intended to use them.
Yeah,
'Cause-
because you're defaming their person. I mean, and I heard recently put like, why are we shocked fake news is here,
Mhm.
and why are people lying? Because that's how news has always been, and a lot of people will point to William Randolph Hearst, and that's how he made his name for himself with mellow journalism.
Yep.
And sure, like that's a thing, but everyone knew it was fake because people actually could think. I mean, heck, I could tell you a story I just pulled up right now on a website that said something about Hillary's election machine's gone wrong, and it could just be a link to an American Idol thing, and you'd not even know. And all I change is Hillary and American Idol.
Yep.
But it doesn't take 2 seconds of thought to figure out, oh wait, that's not real.
Yeah, but again, like this election has really been pushed, and besides Russia, which Russia is blamed heavily for the results of this election by the Democrats and the left. Elements. I think there are honest elements that exist, and to be honest, I think more of those honest elements are probably in the online space. New York Times have had some decent indicators of not being, like coming back from the brink. I don't think it'll help them, but they had some reconsideration and some decent publications. But other sites are like trying to not acknowledge, the fact that Russia influenced the election cannot have been that important. They're outsizing the proportion of importance Russia has.
Well, do you remember during the election, speaking of what's considered fake news on one side but not fake news on the other, during the election when they were saying that one of Trump's top people in his campaign has financial ties to Russia.
Yep, I
and they have
remember
proof of it. Did you ever see what the actual proof they all quoted was?
What I heard was there was proof, not proof, but like he was like a consultant for a state-owned enterprise or something.
No, but I don't care. Did you ever actually see the proof?
No
used?
idea. I didn't see it. I didn't.
All right, I'll find it. We can put it in the show notes.
What was
But
the
what
general?
it was a line from a ledger with a scribble that you couldn't make out the name, but they said it could be this guy's name, but you can't tell me it's not this guy's name, so it must be it.
Didn't he have to resign too?
I forget if he did or not. But anyways, like FBI looked into it. All of the three header acronym agencies looked into it, and no one found anything there. But the actual proof was just nothing. But that wasn't fake news because it supported the narrative.
Yeah.
That was popular.
And again, to break it down for people, I think this is an important thing to note. Narratives are factually separated from truth and fact. Like, if we're talking like a scientific truth or the data, narratives are separate from data because narratives are established on ignoring data that contradicts the story you're trying to construct. And the word construct does mean fiction. I'm just pointing that out. Like, a narrative is for a fiction novel. That means you are intentionally creating a falsehood. To create a story that supports your... Well, I got a link. Oh, God, that's it? I'm showing it. This is going to be amazing. But yeah, do you agree with my definition of narrative? Because it's a leftist word. I mean, it's Marxist, really. You're creating a narrative to... That's it?
That's it.
So it's 2 million, 20 million?
They're not even sure on what if they're using rubles, that's like $5.
What? Yeah.
A joke, but
Wow, that's it?
that was the butt of the black ledger.
A paper illegible. Okay, and he wasn't charged or anything, right?
No, they brought nothing to it, and nothing ever came of it.
But yeah, the point, I just want to bring it back though. We were talking about narrative, right? Narrative construction. Like, that is a lot what's happening on the left. Narratives are inherently false. They're not necessarily all lies, but the premises are based on some amount of falsehood. Would you agree with that?
Well, I'd agree with that, but the best lies are based in truth.
Yeah, and it's a point. And I think this brings it back to we got to touch on this. We don't have to do a lot of time with it. We're at about, we're hitting a good 45 minutes into the show. But I want to bring up before we get to the conclusion of this, I guess this would be considered part of the conclusion. The blaming of social media. This has died down a little bit, I find, in the last week, but blaming social media and, by extension, the fake news. This is where the fake news in social media, and specifically Russia controlling the fake news, right? The beginning of this logic chain started with blaming places like Facebook. And specifically, of course, they are blaming rightist echo chambers. Would you say that's an accurate representation?
Well, I honestly think they were throwing everything into a jar they could.
Yeah, but this is what they're trying to conflate.
So they wouldn't get fired. Well, no, the problem is even to have this on news feeds and you promoted it.
Yep.
What Mark Zuckerberg just caved, really, to pressure from internal sources and external sources. In reality, Facebook's one of the biggest offenders of manipulating news feeds
Before the election.
Well, not just for the election, but to suit internal employees' policy preferences.
But isn't that insane?
And there's been cases. Well, no, that's my problem with it. When they've been, it's California and Silicon Valley, so they're more liberal and left-leaning.
Let's say not more, a lot.
A lot, okay, fine, a lot more. But that's people that work there, so the way they were doing some tests, they got filtering out things that did not agree with their view of the world.
Yep.
And imposing more of another.
Mm-hmm.
And so they already got in trouble for it, and so they already kind of were on the left of center line. And then after the Democrats lost, they all blamed Facebook first off.
Yeah.
Just blamed them like all out. And the problem with that is you already have them left of center proof-wise, and you can't just come right back and say, well, they were helping the right do it.
But they did. And again, remember, we're talking about the narrative has nothing to do with logical reality. It's everything to do with what is convenient at this moment.
And then the next was Twitter. They were blaming Twitter. And the problem with Twitter is
it's also quite left-leaning.
Well, Jack Dorsey can do whatever he wants. And they actually had, I think the Trump campaign actually pulled advertising dollars from them, like $8 million of advertising, because they kept changing their policies and what they could and couldn't use and what they'd endorse. And it got to the point where Jack Dorsey himself was coming down from on high and going, this is no longer approved. Like even something as simple as like an emojicon is no longer approved.
It's I can't even, it's hard to process how this can be a thing.
But then as the primaries went on, they kept banning more center-right Twitter handles and users.
I did notice that, yeah.
But the problem was, sure, extreme racists, get those out of there, but there's always going to be extremes everywhere.
Yep.
But they were usually, but then they started to go into people who caused hate crimes or started cyberbullying or trolling. And they
can I ask, for a point of clarification, Matt, how do you hate crime with words on a social network?
You tell people to stop doing stuff. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Can I just point out for the listeners, hate crimes aren't a thing in America. Thank God we have freedom of speech. And the problem with hate crimes is who define hates crime. What the hell's a hate crime? That word bothers me because it's so antithetical to free speech. But yeah, they are accused of hate crimes, and then what's a hate crime? Like, you said a mean thing about Hillary Clinton.
Is it a hate crime because she's a woman, or is it a hate crime because she's old, or is it a hate crime because the person who said it was a man?
Yeah, and those are all not hate crimes. That's called critique, or being an asshole.
I mean, last time I checked, I have the right to be an asshole in the U.S.
Yep, and I'm pretty sure hate speech is I can't stand it. Like in Britain now, you can get arrested for hate speech. That should never come to America.
In Britain, you can get, well, actually not even in Britain, but if your publication, for instance, say your words, your newspaper article, your book, your website, if it goes through England, or if somebody opened it in England, you are liable for hate speech laws and for actually personally liable and defamation suits.
Oh my God.
The issue is you can get charged, and it's actually really easy to get convicted, just they can never enforce collection.
Yeah. Oh my God, England.
But it's wide-reaching, and it's a little bit scary. I mean,
Yep.
and the same goes for Canada right now.
Yeah, Canada's slipping. But that'll have to be another thing, too. I think we're diverging a bit. We'll come back to speech, but I think to finish this out, we gotta... Because it's related to speech, right? Because, like, it's not just, is Russia influencing the election? Conclusion between us, would you agree that our most reasonable conclusion right now is there is not evidence for it, it's just rhetorical?
There's not evidence for it, and is rhetorical. But I'm also going to put in this. It's if you have to censor what gets put out on the internet,
Yeah.
then we start to have a bigger problem.
Yeah,
Because
then we're going...
who controls the pipes? Who controls what can we put out? I mean, what's the next step? That you need a certification run by an organization to be a journalist to write anything on paper?
Yep,
Well,
and this brings it back to conclude this segment before we go, Matt. I have to bring the article you showed me, the Yahoo News, Web Giants Cooperate on Removal of Extremist Content. Europe passed a law forcing the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and Microsoft to step up their efforts to remove extremist content in Europe. And the worst part of this article, and in EU, they do not define what they define as extremist. And of course, extremist means right-wing extremists, I'm sure.
That's the only extremist they're allowed to talk about.
Yeah, so you can't talk about left-wing extremists, like people want to destroy society and make it a anarchist, Marxist paradise. You can't probably talk about Muslim or Islamist extremist, or, I don't know, cultist extremists who believe a comet's coming to save us and we got to kill everybody to make it come or something. We can't talk about that. Well, maybe we can, because they'd find a way to tie it to Christianity. But in general, right? But this article doesn't actually elaborate on it.
Well, I mean, I guess in a way, I mean, it's a scary premise.
Yeah.
If we were talking about, like, I'll be honest, even when we're talking about Twitter has such a small influence net in people's lives.
Yeah, the user base is really small.
That it's so small that it doesn't matter what Twitter does, to be completely honest. But when you start to get Google, Facebook,
Microsoft,
Amazon, it's like when you start to get the giants that billions of people use, that's when it starts to get, you're bigger than countries. That's when it starts to get, okay, sure, you're a company and you're private and you have the right to do anything you want, but don't abuse this.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to, like, what's the recourse, or what going forward, right? We're about almost done with this episode, but going forward, like, recourse or conclusion, or how are we gonna move forward from here? Like, how do we combat this, or how do we resist it? Like, let's get the 1984 example, and what if this gets really bad? Do we just stop using these platforms? Do we use new platforms? Do we vote with our feet? Do we... What's the...
I mean, Twitter got bad enough, and it was crappy enough where it loses its user base. I'm not naive enough to say, and I've been around the internet for enough years to know that things shift. I mean, just look at MySpace, look at Friendster. But they're getting to a size where they're so big, but I don't know. We could vote with the feet. I just think people need to take some responsibility in the slightest sense, like an infant's responsibility on checking a site, reading something.
Follow-up, research, comparison.
I mean, or just read or listen to a podcast, to read an article. Don't just see a tweet, 140-character tweet that says, Russia just invaded India to take all the tigers
Oh my
and run
God,
away,
Russia, why?
and then start a protest in the middle of the street saying, "Oh, how dare you? We like tigers."
Yeah.
It's like
So
if
check
you were
your
to click.
outrage, use your brain. Is that what we're concluding today?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good conclusion.
Because, I mean, it does come down to, like, and I think I've heard other pundits will say and commentators say this, diversify your news intake. Read news you agree with, read news you disagree with. Use your brain, try to find the truth. You cannot just read the news you agree with. It'll leave you blindsided, and when a guy or woman you don't like wins, you're gonna have a meltdown, like the whole left and the protest and the crying puppy room at Yale. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, we could go on this for hours.
Yep.
But there's, I mean, there's, we need to be informed, but at the same problem, there's nothing wrong with misinformed people or people who don't know much. If you're happy in your life and you're good, you don't necessarily need to know everything.
Well, we don't. But I think the really thing is not to just justify our own existence, but in general, people should have a minimum quality, like a minimum amount of knowledge if they're gonna vote. Not like I'm saying we should qualify it, but like people, like good information should be out there for those who want to access it. And by good, I'm gonna define good. I hate that word in general because it's so subjective. But like fact-driven news plus analysis, and I think you'd agree that's what we're trying to provide.
So read The Economist and check sources. But I think we need to end on old Denzel though and Mark Twain.
Okay.
'Cause that's the best way.
And we'll use
I mean,
the original one because it's a better picture. His face
Yeah.
is just way more glorious than the Zero Hedge article. But yeah, just remind everybody. If you don't, you can be uninformed, you can be misinformed, or you can go step 3, which is trying to inform yourself. And me and Matt aren't going to say we're arbiters of all correctness. We're educated and read, but every day we learn something that might contradict something we know. So we're going to try to be flexible too, and I think that's a big factor. I mean, within the last year, my opinion about like the election in America has changed based on data. And I think
I can tell you from talking to him over the last few years, he's changed a lot on his position just from information that came out.
yeah, so it's we'll do our best to just be part of the, we'll call it the misinformed, and try to get to that, more informed zone, and I hope the rest of you will come with us. And thanks for, if you made it this far, we are almost an hour in. We appreciate you sticking with it.
Have a great week.
Yeah, we will try to do this once a week. The format should be pretty similar. We'll try to tighten it up as it needs. And yeah, feel free to let us know how you liked it or didn't like it. We'll try to provide as many sources as possible. If you'd like more, also let us know. Thanks a lot for listening.
Quick like, subscribe, all the above.